Thank you very much, and congratulations, Aarti, for a very significant piece of an an ethnographic dissertation, which I say significant because there have been quite a bit of reflections around the weaving communities in and around Kanchipuram for some time in Tamil Nadu, and not the least of it being from one of her predecessors in MIDS, my friend K. Bharathan, who his famous 1985 treatise on the lives of Kanchipuram weavers in Frontline was one of the first such extensive documents of the lives there. And again, within the Indian context, to echo, and much of what I'll say will be echoing a little bit of what Anandi said earlier. The cross-section between the emergence of weaving as a discourse within the national movement had a very interesting byproduct in a particular kind of research work, if you want to call it, field work, if you want to call it, theorization, if you call it. But the fact that on the one hand, the Swadeshi movement was emphasizing the idea of khadi and the idea of the hand woven and the idea of coarse material, and along with that, the middle class aspirations, as Aarti has also pointed out in the book, that made space for some kind of a revival for silk and for more elite aspirations of a certain emerging urban middle class. So these coincided, and you have therefore a list of distinguished names who have gone into this field. People like Gira Sarabhai, for example, who set up the incredible Sarabhai Museum, Calico Museum as it's called, with all sorts of very, very specialized inquiry and research into weaving traditions in India and other textile traditions. You have names like John Urban, you have names like Martand Singh, Priya Devi, Jyotindra Jain, Rita Kapoor, Chelna Javeri, Jagdish Mittal, Kalyan Krishna, Anand Krishna, the Banaras group, Moti Chandra, all of them. You have Pupul Jaikar, who's done some very interesting new work in that. And recently, a few years ago, you had this American scholar, Brianna Blasco, who sort of tried to connect dance and the sari and so on. So, the weaving traditions of India have generated that need for inquiry. First of all, the sheer diversity, the Paithan and Pathan and Chanderi and Kanchipuram, of course, and Sambalpur and Surat and Venkatagiri and Mangalagiri. And it's like an incredible map of weaving traditions that permeate all over, and which has made people look at what this actually means. When earlier they were certainly within a caste framework. Even today, broadly speaking, the construction of the community is around caste lines, but I think there is now, it's jumped into a national discourse. It's become like heritage. It's become like Indian tradition. And when it slips into that territory, then I think a completely different discourse emerges where caste and nation begin to overlap. And at some points, a valorization happens of certain practices which otherwise might have been looked at a little more critically. So, I mean, the sari, after all, the woven sari being a material that drapes the body of the woman itself becomes a issue within a national context. What kind of woman's body, what kind of draping should it be? How should the body be presented in a new nation? Earlier, it was just your jati and your village and your desh, but when it becomes the nation, a completely different question emerges. So this tussle between what could be called something like pehchan, if you want, the more acceptable word, identity, which a particular kind of a weave and a particular kind of a tradition represents, vis-a-vis mang or demand. the market demand, the taking over of market forces in playing with the idea of identity, in remarketing identity, in revalorizing identity, I think these begin to play a very kind of a special game. And then you enter this whole idea of the construction of tradition and for the post-independence area of micro-traditionalization as a market specialization. So it's not just conjurum anymore, but it's a particular, I mean, if Nalli and Radha silk are next to each other, they'll represent two different micro-traditions. They don't necessarily represent the same tradition, or even if they work with the same community, it becomes micro-differentiations. And I think these are then playing into both national and global spaces, which I think Aarti has hinted at. I think maybe another book is waiting here for developing this into a more socio-political document. I mean, they're all very interestingly suggested in it. For me, the most interesting chapter in this is the 6th chapter, which is all mobilizing value. And I think that chapter itself can be expanded into a very, very significant and delightful book, because it's in that area that this whole discourse around the sari resides. For example, where Aarti says, attending to the discourse of values surrounding the production and use of these saris in Tamil Nadu sheds light on the Padmasali or juxtaposition, the symbolic with the practical, in authenticating their own relationship with the product of their work. Notions of identity and difference with an abstract body, loom body and cloth body, not only defend their genealogy as original weavers, but also guide their work, practice, and self-representation as producers of the original or genuine Kanchipuram sari in a universe of duplicates. That's a fascinating area to go into. This whole construction, production, and revalorization of a completely artificial thing called tradition, which after all a 20th century product. Before that, there was nothing called tradition. Anything that we say is 1,000 years is probably 100, 150 years old. And this whole fake universe into which many of these artisanal sectors buy into or get bought into becomes something that I think we need to really look at. But I think the ethnographic value of the book, of course, is in being able to look at a community like this, not as a closed system, not as a system that has watertight borders, but porous borders, that it's open, it's able to assimilate, it's able to rework, like Anandi pointed out. There is a constant negotiation with the present, a constant negotiation with modernity, constant negotiation with technology, and very interestingly, constant negotiation with social practices connected with the market, which includes sales. I mean, other day, a person was mentioning to me that nowhere in the world probably you can enter a sari shop. And this was a guy, a friend of mine, who was describing the story that I went with my 6 female members of my family to the sari shop to do some wedding shopping, buy saris for people. And I had gone along with 2 other male members of the family. And while the ladies were busy selecting the saris and being completely absorbed in that, we sat in a corner and we were taken care of with tiffin and coffee and and that's a fabulous marketing idea, which I think makes the whole idea of going into a shop something very homely. It's completely oppositional to the idea of the mall, which is impersonal and which is very commercial. But here there's a personalization that is afforded that I think is very important. So this, what Aarti would obviously call the hidden histories of artisan caste affirmation, is something that she has done exceptionally well. But I think this work also needs to move beyond that into what do you call it, mutations that are happening to this caste identity. And the mutations happening tremendously. It's as fast as artificial intelligence. It's the caste that you met day before yesterday was not the caste you're going to meet day after tomorrow. There's a tremendous change that is happening. And a part of it is, of course, politics driven or identity politics driven, but the other part is very much the global economy at work. So I'm also particularly interested in the aspects that Aarti's work connects with the intersection between the Brahmin and the non-Brahmin around the beginnings of the 20th century, circa 1930 onwards, when the revival of these, within quotation, classical dance is happening. I'm saying within quotation very deliberately because there's nothing really classical about it. It's again an invention. But how the need for creating this new dance body as a departure from the old Sadir and Dasi Atom needed a new costuming, and that new costuming coming in the manner of a new set of designs being produced by Srimati Rukmini Devi Arundel. She even went as far as setting up looms in Kalakshetra and began providing new designs. And these are some aspects that Aarti has referred to in her work. But once again, this can be an entire area for a new research and a new book, certainly, when the material is extensive on this. And the new patterns that came in, for example, obviously well-recognizable big borders, well-recognizable entry of peacocks in the borders, or the Rudraksha and stuff like that, or the temple motifs. And the completely different color coordination as opposed to what the Dasis wore. I mean, the complaint against the Dasis, and this is a recorded complaint in many, many articles and newspaper reports and so on. And since the late 19th century, the objection to the Dasi dress, the dress that the Devadasis wore as they performed, was that they were not taking the sari between their legs, which obviously is an affront to the idea of chastity. I mean, this is what the upper caste, upper class, sophisticated and chaste woman would do, that, you protect your genitals in a particular manner through taking the sari between the leg. And the way that the Dasis defied that by hybridizing their costume, maybe through pajamas that came in, and through certain kinds of Islamic influence, probably certain kind of petticoats that came in. So this was seen as being highly offensive and highly indecent. And this was a area that was addressed by Rukmini Devi and her friends to really repair this and to present a more sanitized version in public, so that this dance and this dancing body is more acceptable. And part of it was done very cleverly by dividing the sari space into a very clear three-part distinction, etc., etc. And those are areas that others have written about, but I think it's an area for great amount of research that remains. Aarti does mention the three shuttle corvée that came in, and the corvéization or the Sanskritization of the dance sari, which is very interesting in itself. I remember my friend and colleague Chandralekha once telling me that in Music Academy, during a particular dance season, in the foyer, someone approached Bala Saraswati, who was there, a reporter or someone, and said, "Madam, what is the... we are told that the Kalakshetra dance style is far better than the style that you are doing. What do you have to say about it?" And apparently, Rukmini Devi was standing at your shot, and Bala said, yeah, in Tamil she said, yeah, just by wearing big borders, you don't become a dancer. So, this contest also happened in the dance world. It was partly gossip, it was partly articulated, it was partly backroom talk, but it was very much there. What represents true dance, what represents authentic dance, etc. But none of this comes close to what's happening today in this area of the dance costume. I mean, I have a personal experience. In the year 2004, a Japanese woman who had learnt Bharatanatyam in Chennai with Yellappa Pillai came to visit, and Yellappa Pillai was also Chandralekha's guru. And so she came to meet Chandralekha, and she had come with her daughter, a very interesting cross between Indian and the Japanese, and who was named Shakti. This Japanese lady, had changed her name to Vasantamala, and in Kyoto, the old capital of Japan, she ran a Bharatanatyam school called the Vasantamala School of Indian Dances. So anyway, they had come with a group of 28 Japanese tourists, and they were going to tour for 1 month in South India and go back after a month. But Vasantamala and her daughter came with a request. They said, we'll come back to Chennai on our way back to Tokyo. We'll come back and travel via Chennai. In this 1 month, is it possible to create 8 new Bharatanatyam costumes for 8 of my dance students who are going to have an Arangetram? So Chandra, of course, brushes say, I have moved away from all this and don't disturb with all this. So I said, look, Baba, I'll try to help you. So I called up Shanti Tailors in Mylapore, whom I knew, and the guy came on the phone, and I said, look, this is the case. There is this Japanese dancers over here who will come and meet you this afternoon. They'll select the material. They will give you the measurements. They've brought samples and all that. Is it possible when they go back, you deliver this 8 costumes, 1 month? It was the month of July or something. So that guy said, no, 1 month is impossible. No, I can't do it in 1 month. I said, what do you mean? This is off season. There is not much demand anyway. Why? What is the problem? Why can't you do 8 costumes? What's so difficult about it? So he said, no, I don't have time for all that. I can't do it, This is too short notice. So I said, but why? It's just 8 costumes. So he said, you don't seem to understand. Tonight, I'm flying to Geneva. In Geneva, Zurich and Bern, I have to deliver 320 costumes. Bharatanatyam costumes. So, of course, it took my breath away, but I didn't show my shock on the phone. And I said, yeah, okay, but you'll go and you'll finish that in 2-3 days and you'll come back, won't you? Then he started talking to me like I was some, kindergarten boy. He said, no, you don't understand. Then I'll come back to Geneva. Then I could go to London, Leicester and Bradford. I have to deliver 410 costumes. And then from there I have to travel to New York and Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. I have to measure 440 costumes. For all that I have to go personally because the final cut and fit I have to do, etc., etc. So you see, sir, it's not possible. I'll come back only after a month. You just tell your friends to come and give their material. I'll courier it to them. Maybe not within a month, but it will be delivered within a month and a half. Now, this is the global scale in which sari production, dance sari production has reached. It's all silk saris. It's all coming from Kanjivaram mostly. And it's all coming from a few small communities. Much more than probably the classical Bharatanatyam dancer. It is the costume maker who's probably has a bulk passport with multi-entry visa and who's traveling the world. It's a case study. It's an absolute case study for any anthropologist or sociologist or ethnographer. So I think this transformation of Bharatanatyam into a global commodity, probably one of the most exported items out of India, is something that's worthy of a contextual research on the connection between the form and the costume, how the costume has changed. Of course, cinema helped a little bit, but essentially it was the beginnings in the 1930s and how an entire rethinking of the woman's body, the nationalized woman's body happened, and I think that's an important area to look at. So, so basically I think that's the area that is opened out with the kind of work that Aarti has done, and one can only be grateful for this opening out, because I think this one book contains material for another at least 3 more, and I think that's the way one has to look at it. And congratulations to, of course, Vinita Thambi for having guided this work, and for the MIDS for having enabled the production of all this. So it's oh, she didn't. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I thought she was okay. So anyway, congratulations again, and all the best.